welcome or welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. This is a promotional video on the book tour for Sunny Gale by Jamie Lisa Forbes. I was sent a copy of this book in order to be part of the book tour. Shout out to Eric from Break Even Books for organizing the book tour. If you're an indie author or if you want someone who supports indie authors, definitely also go check out the link to Eric's channel. The link for Sunny Gale and also for the author's Goodreads will be linked below as well. So if you are a fan of historical fiction, if you are an equestrian girly, if you're a feminist, chances are you're probably going to like Sunny Gale. It takes place in 1800s Nebraska. We're following a young girl named Hannah. When she's introduced to us in the beginning of the book, we learn that her father passed away, and again, this is in the very beginning, so it's not spoilers. Her father passed away, which leaves this big hole in the family, and if you know anything about life over 100 and some years ago, gotta be hard as a woman to be able to find means of feeding your family when the husband was the breadwinner for the home, right? And the woman was the homemaker. We're talking about like homesteads, cowboys, a little bit of that westward expansion. And so Hannah's mother remarries. An incident happens which pushes her to have this newfound love of horses and ponies. We follow her as a teenage girl. Her family is moving out to Nebraska because of this promise of new land and like support from the government. All of these things that are going on at the time. I do like history, but I'm not that much of a history buff, so I was relying on the author to supplement some of these facts. So if you know more than me, please feel free to go ahead and drop it in the comments if you know more about what was happening in that time of history. So they're on this homestead and she ends up in situations where she kind of just wants some freedoms. As we follow her throughout her life in the book, we learn that she ends up being a kind of pioneer in horseback riding and rodeo shows as a woman, in which typically women were not allowed to perform. She faces a lot of criticism along the way, whether it be from family. We know from the back cover, again, this is not a spoiler, that she goes through a relationship and that her husband is not approving of what she does. So the entire book is really just about her, I think, breaking glass ceilings. Something that I will say that the author does well is really giving you the feeling of being in late 1800s Nebraska. Not that I thought that that could be any particular like feeling, but I guess growing up as someone who was a big fan of Little House on the Prairie when it was on channel 13, my god, I'm dating myself, that it gave me that kind of energy. Also, I'm a big fan of Anne of Green Gables. It's got that, just make it sprinkle in a little bit of our modern feminism. So our character does voice her opinion in certain situations in which she's like, this is how I feel, or this is how I'm going to feel. And so we see her kind of move through that space of being the daughter and having this expectation of how she is going to move forward and take care of the home and marry and do those things and do her chores, or just what is expected of her once she comes of age and is a woman, but her choosing not to take that path. We get some flashbacks of her in the future and her when she was younger. You can tell when reading this that the author, I think, clearly must have a love of horses. I really appreciate the way that the author was able to describe the scenes in which Hannah specifically interacted with the horses. It gives a sense of awe and this sense of appreciation that is important for us to see from her lens, as the horses both kind of act as like this key to her freedom, but also part of her joy in her journey. And that to me could only be done by someone who is clearly an equestrian, probably themselves, or has this appreciation of it. Also, something that we see kind of happening in the periphery in the beginning of the book and then also a little bit later on is just like different ways that society is interacting with the space around them as these homesteads are being built. So Hannah notices that there are people who are acting a certain way or dressing a certain way or speaking a certain way because of their interactions with Native Americans, what the relationship between homesteaders and Native Americans are, what tension there is, what troubles they all faced, and it's kind of happening around Hannah. Something that I get nervous about sometimes with reading historical fiction is that those kinds of tensions and what was happening in the world just kind of fall off in the periphery, that they don't have any kind of consequence or any kind of like impact on the characters that are living in that time, but I think it's really important that characters still, even if their narrative is not directly in contact with that subject matter, that they still have some kind of exposure to it to make it a little bit more realistic that they're in this time in which these things are happening, right? Their actions are a consequence of these other tensions and turmoils, politically, geographically, culturally, whatever is the case. So we do get some of that happening again around Hannah, and I like that the author included that in there so that for me it can just really much more ground us in the mentality of these characters, where they are, why they're making the decisions that they're making, because of where they came from and their choice to fall into these very specific binary gender roles. Hannah is fighting generations of expectations upon women that are being placed upon her, and this is a lot for a young person or any person to work with and against, especially when you're like out in the middle of nowhere, right? Their closest neighbor is someone who's like a half day's ride away. They don't see very many people, if at all, unless they go to the market. We see more of Hannah being more vocal and kind of like really pushing back when she's in closer proximity at things like the rodeo, more so than when she is younger, but we see the seeds being planted. So if that sounds like something that you would like to pick up, you can totally go check it out. Like I said, the link is listed below. And again, I think if you are the kind of person who likes their historical fiction, give it a little bit of some modern commentary and thoughts in there, then this might just be for you. Thanks again to the author for sending me a copy of this, and thanks again to Eric, again, all or who linked down below. If you want to support my channel, I have a Patreon and a book talk, Goodreads, all that other jazz, where you can stay in touch with me and other things linked below. I post videos whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching. Bye.
What's it making, Mr. Wonka? Mr. Wonka work the factory.